I would like to welcome you all as we begin week number 8 in our ongoing series of discussions surrounding the book of Joshua. And this week we will come to a conclusion of the actual stories of the conquest. We will be talking about the final battles that take place in the initial stages of the Israelite conquest of the land of Canaan. The material that we will be covering in this Tuesday session can be found in your books, books of Joshua, chapters 10 and 11, which in our authorized version are found on pages 49 to 61. And I urge you, as you are going through a description of the battles that are being fought, to take a look at the map at the end of your book, found on page 247, which shows, there are two maps that are shown. One shows what is called the Southern Conquest, the battles that took place in chapter number 10, that describe the battles that were fought really in what is now the central part of the present land of Israel. And then in chapter 11, we will consider the battles that were fought in the northern part of the country, part of what we call the Northern Conquest. All of these battles will concern us primarily in our discussion this coming Tuesday evening. Now, I have prepared a series of questions for you, which I think are self-explanatory. The material that you will be reading is not difficult. It's mainly a discussion of military tactics and battles and fights that occur between Israel and the Canaanite tribes. The material itself is relatively easy to understand, but there are some underlying questions, four actually, that I would like you to consider as you read this material. And our discussion will be based not so much on the actual events that are depicted in the story, that I trust you will be able to grasp. The questions that I want to deal with on Tuesday night concern the deeper questions behind the actual battle and some of the lessons that we learn. So here are the four questions that I would ask you to consider. Question number one. In the story of the battle between Israel and the Canaanite tribes in the southern campaign, this takes place just after Israel last week, you'll remember, concluded a treaty with the inhabitants of Gibeon, and the Gibeonites, under subterfuge, arrange a peace treaty with Israel. The events that take place in chapter 10 and 11 follow upon that Gibeonite agreement. Question number one. Why did Adoni-Zedek, that was the name of the Canaanite king of the city of Jerusalem, why did Adoni-Zedek and the Canaanite kings who were allied with him, why did they attack initially not Joshua and the Israelite forces, but they began their attack against the city and the inhabitants of Gibeon? They did not attack Joshua directly. Instead, the initial part of the battle was fought against the Gibeonites, who had concluded a peace treaty with Joshua. Why was it that the Canaanite allied force began their battle attacking the Gibeonites and not Joshua and his forces? Question number two. The Gibeonites, when they realize that they are under attack, immediately send messages to Joshua and to the leaders of the tribes of Israel, and they request that they come to the defense of the city against the attacking Canaanite kings. Question number two, why did Joshua and the Israelite army come to the defense of the Gibeonites when they were threatened by attack from the other Canaanite kings? In other words, you'll remember Joshua and the Israelite tribes had been deceived into making a treaty. Why, when the Gibeonites were under attack, did Joshua and the forces of Israel feel compelled to come to the aid of the Gibeonites and to defend them against the attack of the other Canaanite kings? Question number three. As you will see, while I have mentioned before that the age of miracles is largely absent once the Jewish people have entered the land of Canaan, we do see in this southern battle, in this southern conquest, in this campaign, that there does seem to be a series of miraculous events that accompany the success, the victory of the Israelite tribes against the confederation of Canaanite kings. Question number three simply asks you to do this. To answer the question, or to address the question, how are we to understand the miracles that accompanied Israel's defeat of the large Canaanite forces in the first campaign, the southern campaign, that occurred in the central part of the southern part of the country? You'll find that information contained in chapter number 10. And finally, In chapter number 11, which describes the conquest of the North, my question to you is this: in what ways were the conquests of the Southern campaign different from or similar to the Northern campaign? You'll find there are ways in which they are similar, but there are also a number of ways in which they are different. Please address the similarities and the differences. And then, in addition, finally, what did these conquests share in common with the earlier battles we have already studied with regard to the fall of the cities of Jericho and Ai? So you're not only comparing the Northern and the Southern campaign, you're looking at how they compare with the first two battles that we discussed in the book of Joshua. These are the questions that we will turn to in our chat room on Tuesday evening. I look forward to seeing all of you there.